This is a channel about the amazing animals in our world. Today we're going to answer the question, how do snails eat with up to 26,000 teeth? If you watch regularly, then you probably already know that snails don't actually have teeth. Instead of teeth, they have a sort of tongue-shaped organ covered with thousands of tiny sharp teeth. This is called the radula. We can find these in all gastropods. Now, gastropods are a large group of mollusks that includes both snails and slugs. Most people think of land snails, the ones you might see in your garden, but there's also sea snails, which have shells, and slugs, which don't. So like I said, all of these animals have radulas. The number of teeth varies from one species to another. Now, although each tooth is very small, together they form a pretty large surface. On a single radula, they can measure more than 3 millimeters long and almost 1 millimeter wide. That's as wide as 2 of your fingernails side by side. The reason why the snail has so many teeth is that it uses them like a rasp or file to scrape and tear its food into small bits. So, how do they use it? Well, let's take a closer look. A snail is not particularly picky about what it eats. You'll often find them munching away on leaves and fruits from different plants. But they will also happily eat decaying plants and even algae growing on rocks. Basically, they're not fussy. When they find something they want to eat, they press their radula against it and start scrapping off small bits. When a snail eats, it moves its radula back and forth, shredding and grinding the food. This allows it to break down tough plant cell walls and grind them into small pieces. Those pieces are then mixed with mucus from the snail's mouth and swallowed. As the food passes down the esophagus, powerful muscles squeeze the esophagus to push the food down and mix it with digestive juices. At the end of the esophagus, there's a stomach where acids break down the food even further. After that, the food goes into the intestines where some nutrients are absorbed. And finally, what's left over goes out of the body as waste. You may have noticed that I haven't mentioned any saliva yet. Saliva is an important part of the diet for most animals. Not only does it help lubricate the food and make it easier to swallow, but it also contains enzymes that begin digesting the food while the animal is still chewing it. However, snails don't really produce any saliva. Like I said, instead of saliva, they use mucus. Mucus is a slimy substance that comes from special glands near the snail's mouth. It has a different purpose. When the snail moves, it produces mucus to help lubricate its path and protect its body from damage. So there's no need for saliva. The mucus already moistens the food, and the digestive system does the rest. There are about 40,000 known species of land snails and slugs. They all eat in basically the same way. However, there are also sea snails, which have shells and live in water. Sea snails feed in the same way as well, but their radula is adapted to catch and eat other animals. Even the smallest sea snail has at least 25,000 teeth. Some of them are really good hunters, able to chase down fast-moving prey. Many sea snails have even developed venom. Their teeth inject a toxin into their victims, paralyzing them. Then the snail can eat them at its leisure. Of course, not all sea snails are predators. There are plenty of grazing species that scrape algae off rocks and seabeds. Another thing to keep in mind is that despite their seemingly slow metabolism, snails eat constantly. They are not the kind of animals that eat a big meal and then go a long time without eating again. Instead, they eat little meals throughout the day and night. You could say that they graze. The upside of this strategy is that their constant snacking prevents them from getting hungry, which makes them less likely to be eaten themselves. Because they are constantly eating, they also get to recycle nutrients locked inside dead organisms. And since they don't need to spend a lot of energy finding food, they can focus their energy on reproducing. In short, being a snail works well. For those of you wondering, yeah, snails do sleep. They don't sleep in the traditional sense. Mammals and birds sleep by closing their eyes, but snails just curl up into their shell and fall asleep that way. Maybe one day we'll learn more about their sleeping habits, but for now, that's a mystery. There are lots of things that snails can't do, like sleep or sweat or blink, but what they lack in smarts and flashy features, they make up for in sheer numbers of teeth. I mean, having 26,000 teeth on your tongue is pretty impressive. Now let's talk about how efficiently a snail uses its teeth. Remember how I told you that each tooth is only responsible for a small part of the work. That means that each tooth doesn't wear down very quickly. The radula is the perfect example of evolution at work. Evolution is a process that happens over many generations when the environment favors certain traits over others. In the case of the radula, it was advantageous for snails to have lots of small teeth rather than a few large ones. First of all, this meant that when the snail was eating, the force of chewing would be spread out over many teeth instead of just a few. This means that they don't wear down as quickly and the snail can eat more before the teeth become damaged. Secondly, smaller teeth are cheaper to replace. If a tooth falls out or gets damaged, it's much less of a problem if there are lots of other teeth to do the job. A snail could easily lose a few dozen teeth and still be able to eat effectively. This isn't the case for mammals, especially us humans. If we lost a few dozen teeth, we would have trouble chewing our food. So you can see why having lots of small teeth is a good strategy for snails. Snails are everywhere, and you might think that they aren't very exciting creatures, but they really are. They are well adapted to their environments and have unique features that make them fascinating. I hope you enjoyed learning about how a snail eats. If you did, make sure to share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on future episodes. As always, thanks for watching.